as the years have passed, is essential to understanding two things. First of all, why society is structured as it is, which we're going to get into in this part, and also, as we'll get into the final part, how and why we can open the door and bring an end to this nonsense. So what I'm going to talk about in this section is some of the rather bizarre background, just a minute, and going into present-day events and how that pans out across what's happening now. So the idea is to introduce, obviously, a big brother global society, very much in the global terms of 1984. And this is the basic structure they're looking for. And I'm going to go through a series in this section of what I call coordinates. We know the coordinates, the world starts to make sense, and what's happening in the world makes sense, because if you know the outcome that is wanted, you can understand the sequences of events that is taking us there, and we can understand how we can intervene in that. So this is the structure. Very simply, if there's the few and you're going to control the many, you have to centralize decision-making. Because the more points of decision-making there are, the more diversity of decision-making, the less control you're going to have over those decisions. It's like in the old days when I was a kid, they used to have lots of acts where they had people keeping plates spinning on sticks, loads of them all over the stage. And if you have too many plates and too many sticks, too many points of decision-making, then you have plates crashing all over the place. You can't keep control of it. What you want really is one big plate and one big stick, which keep that going forever from a central point. That's the idea. And they want a structure with a world government that would dictate to every country in the world, a world central bank. I'll get into this more in this section. That's fundamentally, not only, but fundamentally one of the reasons for the engineered economic collapse. They want a one world currency, electronic money, no cash, fundamental implications for freedom in that. A world army which would impose the will of the world government on any country that didn't want to accept it, and a microchip population connected to a global computer and the global positioning satellite system. Under that, they want the super states, get into this more later, and under that, they want to break nation states up into regions, which they're already in the process of moving towards, to deunify in a unified response to the edifice of power above. So that's the basic structure. And once we realize that's the outcome they want, you can start to read the world and world events in a very different way. But what I would emphasize is I'm now going to talk about the play-out world, the world as it unfolds in the daily experience. But the fundamental behind it is what we were talking about earlier. The whole thing is about manipulating the way we decode reality, what we experience through the way we perceive the virtual reality game, to stop us understanding that we are consciousness, to put us in the eggshells of little me, and to manipulate the way that we our heads world. That's all the way running through everything. So, once upon a virtual reality, I'm going to just go through a sequence of events that kind of brought us to where we are now. And I'll pick it up in this period, I don't know, 12,000 years ago, maybe more, where there are so many stories and myths. I think it's about 2,000 books in print, I was reading somewhere, about Atlantis and these civilizations, of advanced civilizations, which existed in what is to conventional history, prehistory. And these civilizations were destroyed by vast cataclysmic events, which you can see recorded in the ancient texts and verbal histories of every single ancient culture. Of course, the famous one in the Bible is the Great Flood and all that stuff, but that is mirrored in ancient cultures all over the world. This great cataclysmic period of geological and upheavals, and volcanic upheavals. And there's a very good book called When the Earth Nearly Died, or The Day the Earth Nearly Died, where the researchers have looked at the myths, or what we call myths, of all these stories around the world of the great cataclysmic events, and then they've looked at the biological and geological evidence to see if it supports the stories in the myths. And it does, very, very compellingly. And, of course, like I say, Noah and the biblical story of the Great Flood is the most famous one, but you take that back to its origin, or at least one of its origins, and you go back into ancient Sumer long before, where the same story was told, but it's told everywhere. Now, 98% of what I'm talking about today is come from hard research. Where it hasn't, I'll tell you. And I'd got to a certain point of taking this back from the physical to trying to get an understanding of what was behind these cataclysmic events and actually what's behind this crazy world, which at one time was not crazy. Probably not that long ago was not crazy. Again, one of the other common themes is that before the cataclysmic events, there was what is often referred to as a golden age of great harmony and a great abundance, when it was almost like a utopian world. And then the cataclysmic events came and everything changed. And I was in America at a place called Sedona in Arizona about 2 months ago. Well, maybe less than that anyway, not that it matters. And I went into this, shall we say, other state of consciousness. For many, many years, I've been going into coma-like states where it's just like unbelievably deep, and sometimes it takes a half an hour, 45 minutes to come out of them very, very slowly. But what suddenly happened in the last few weeks since the turn of the year is I'm going into these deep states, but I'm holding consciousness when I go there. And what happened to me as I went into one of these states just a few weeks ago, I never talked about this before, funnily enough, and this kind of voice started talking to me about what the cataclysmic events were all about and what this situation in the world is all about. And I can only give it you and take it as you will. And what it was that at one point, well, actually, not just at one point, but up to the point where these cataclysmic events happened, the energy field of this Earth and further out was extremely harmonious, extremely balanced, vibrating in a very balanced, harmonious way. And this manifested down to the physical, into the decoded world, as a balanced, loving, abundant, sharing, caring society, which was vastly, vastly different to the way it is now. And what I was then shown, and what the voice referred to as the schism, happened. And what I saw, I found this picture on the internet, which kind of gives a feel for it. What I saw as this voice was talking about the schism was a harmonious energy field, and then through the center of it went this bright blue, like electrical charge, almost like lightning. And everything started vibrating in a chaotic way. And it called it the schism. And as this manifested down through the vibrationals into the decoded world, it manifested itself as a physical version of this schism, which was massive geological events, which not only transformed this reality, or this part of this reality physically in the way that's recorded by the ancients and through to the present day, but it fundamentally changed this reality mentally and emotionally because suddenly we were living in a chaotic energy environment which was being decoded into the physical, and suddenly the chaos and conflict of the schism was manifesting itself as chaotic and conflict and all the rest of it that started to come into the world. And the schism is what has created the schism within human society that wasn't there before. And as I'll get to in the third section today, there's increasing evidence that this schism, indeed this voice went on to say, this schism is now in the process of being corrected. And the other thing this voice said was, people need to understand in relation to this that every single thing is conscious. Some things more conscious than others, but everything has a consciousness. And in fact, the phrase it used was everything has a self-awareness, everything has a self-identity. And it was saying that this schism has a self-identity. It's consciousness. So it has a self-identity. And its self-identity is one of what we would call evil, but what in real terms is fundamental imbalance, loss of harmony, loss of connection to what we would call in the first part of this presentation, heart consciousness. And so this energetic imbalance has become holographic imbalance in the way that it's decoded. Another interesting thing is that, again, I'll come to this part again in the last section with something else, but before the schism, the energy in this reality was so harmonious, so in tune with the human form, and so much more powerful that we didn't eat food. We lived off the energy, everything, because what is food? It's just holographic energy, that's what it is. And we consume food, we're consuming energy. We used to live off the energy. Some people even today, it's very, very difficult today because of the energy environment compared with what it was, still live off what they call prana. They live off energy, they don't eat food. And what I come to understand is that when this energy changed and our ability to get sustenance from energy without food changed, we needed to bridge that gap. We needed to bridge that difference between the energy as was and the energy that replaced it in a much less powerful way, and to bridge that gap for the energy requirements of the body computer was to eat food. This also applied to what we call the animal kingdom. What it was saying was, before, there was no law of the wild. That's not how it was meant to be. You know, we live on a planet that's a bloody killing field. Everything is killing everything else and living off the demise of everything else. And crucial to that is the need for the predator to eat the predated. And so you have this conflict, this fear, where, again, adding massively to the fear as a expression of this schism energy, you've got animals all the time, and humans come to that too, but animals all day are in fear of predators. It's a constant experience of fear. And what it was saying was, although the Bible talks about the wolf laying down with the lamb, a lot of people talk about the lion laying down with the lamb. The point is, when there was no need to eat food and therefore be a predator, there was no conflict, there was no fear, and everything was in harmony. I know it's very difficult to get the mind around that, given what we're experiencing today, But if you think of harmonious energetic environment and then a very different one, the two express themselves physically, as they always do, in the society that we live in. So when these great cataclysmic events were taking place, people of advanced knowledge started to move before and after into other parts of the world. And they took with them this advanced knowledge. And as the world started to recover from these great cataclysmic events, certain societies in different parts of the world that were far more advanced than in other parts of the world started to appear. They started to appear based on this original knowledge that was global, which had now started to remanifest in a lesser way in isolated communities in these parts of the world particularly. And when you look around the world, you can see how the original knowledge in so many ways expresses itself in different ways, but it's the same knowledge in different societies, because the knowledge got fragmented and then went its own way in these, for a while, isolated societies, and so got expressed in different ways. But it's the same knowledge. Credo Mutwa, my friend, the Zulu shaman in South Africa, he threw the bones for me a couple of times. These are carved bones, which the symbols represent something, and you brings the basket, you put your hands over the basket. What are you doing? You're putting your energy field into the energy field, because everything's energy. We're decoding it into a physical, like a bone or something, but actually it's energy. You're putting your energy into the bones. And those symbols, by what they represent, carry a frequency field of what they represent. And therefore, they lock into your energy field in certain ways where they sync with things that are happening in your energy field. So then you throw the bones, and where the bones end up is decided before you've even thrown them, when they're in the basket, because of the energetic, magnetic connections that have been made there. Then you throw them, and then they become like a symbolic, to one who knows what they're doing, a symbolic picture of what's going on in your energy field. And people like Credo Mutwa look at the relationship of different things to each other, and they read them in that way. But the point I'm making is when he did that for me, I thought, it's just like throwing the rune stones in another part of the world. It's just like the tarot cards in another part of the world. Same reason. The reason you pick that tarot card out and not that one is because of the energetic connection you make to that one, because that symbol represents something within you. It's all energy. It's all magnetic energy connecting. And also, as these advanced peoples moved into these different parts of the world, one being Atlantis civilization and the other one Mu, or Lemuria as it later became known to some people, they took, indeed before the cataclysms and after, they took this advanced knowledge and built these fantastic structures that some of which we'd even struggle to build today, because they were operating on a level of knowledge that is not available in the mainstream today, though we get there. This is Peru, where because mainstream history, it's like primitive, less primitive, less primitive, less primitive, us. There's no like, hey, it could be not quite that simple. And when you go to these advanced times, way, way back, you see fantastic structures. These are hundreds of tons, these stones, and you couldn't put a cigarette paper between them. Primitive people built them, read it somewhere. Then you've got the Nazca lines in Peru, which were only seen in their entirety, these insects and birds that are created by scoring away the topsoil and revealing the white below in one continuous line. And some of them were only seen in their entirety in modern times when people were flying over them at 1,000, 2,000 feet. And this is a key area of the world in terms of that re-emerging knowledge after the cataclysmic time, sometime afterwards too. And these are the ancient societies that were more advanced than so much of the rest of the world. And there's a common theme that you find among these ancient societies, along with the cataclysms and stuff like that, and that is of an interbreeding between what clearly appeared to be a non-human race and humans to create hybrid bloodlines. Now this, of course, is the most famous one. It's in the Bible. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were the old men of renown in Genesis. But that basic theme of an interbreeding between a non-human race and humans creating a hybrid bloodline is found all over the world. It's found in this area of the world, which in terms of the bloodlines that are in the positions of power today, very, very significant. This area of Sumer, which became Babylon in what we call Mesopotamia, and the land between two rivers, and of course, what do we call that today? Iraq. Now, the invasion of Iraq was for many reasons. Oil, yes. Control, yes. Multi-reasons. It's very rarely for one reason. But another reason in that package was because that land we now call Iraq is very historically significant to the bloodlines that in the modern world are behind things like the invasion of Iraq, also Egypt and the Indus Valley culture. And this particularly is very significant in terms of the way the world is controlled today. Sumer, which became Babylon, and again, you have the stories from thousands of clay tablets that were found in Iraq and have been translated. I call them the Sumerian tablets. And they talk, like all these others around the world, of this interbreeding between non-humans and humans to create this hybrid bloodline. I'm going to go too much into this because there's so much about the present day I want to get through in this section. But these bloodlines, these hybrids, became the elite. They claimed to be, one of their terms was demigods, part human, part gods, as these non-human groups were perceived to be, because they had abilities to do things because of their advanced knowledge that made them appear godlike. And the old, ancient, recurring theme of the divine right to rule, which is what? The right to rule because of your bloodline, because of your DNA. We have a head of state, you have a head of state, same one, in Buckingham Palace, who is only head of state because of her bloodline, because of her DNA. If she had a different DNA, she might be cleaning the throne, not sitting on it. That's how ridiculous it is. So even today we have this still running. And in the background, among those that control banking and business and media, we seriously have it running. It's just not official like it is with the official royal families. And these demigods, these hybrid bloodlines, were the ones that ended up in the positions of royal power, and they fought among each other like crazy. For instance, even in China, the emperors claimed the right to be emperor because of their connection to what they called the serpent gods. And that's a common theme, the serpent or the reptilian figure. So these bloodlines, let me just hold on that for a second. These bloodlines moved out of that part of the world as what we call time past, and they moved up into Europe. And one of the places that they established themselves was Rome, where they were the bloodlines behind the Roman Empire. Now, one of the common themes that you find wherever these bloodlines went is an empire. You had the Babylonian Empire, for instance. They had the Sumer Empire before that, though it's not recognized in official history too much. And then you had the Roman Empire, and then they moved up into Northern Europe and eventually located their headquarters in Britain, particularly London. And what followed that? The British Empire, on which it was said the sun never set because it was so vast. And Then we had this sleight of hand, because what the British Empire and the others, the French Empire and others in Europe too, same, but the British Empire was the most significant because of its size. What they did was export the bloodline all over the world. And, crucially, I'll get to this later, the secret society network, which follows the bloodline, to manipulate it and its representatives into positions of power to control the societies they target. So what we had when the colonial empires apparently on the surface broke up was global Babylon. Because what happened on the surface, the colonial powers gave independence to the countries like Australia and America and stuff like that. But in truth, what happened was the bloodline and the secret society network stayed in those countries and have gone on controlling those countries ever since, from a central point in Europe. Overwhelmingly London, but there are other places in Europe too, where the very significant centers of power for this bloodline network. And there's two types of control. There's a control you can see, touch, and taste: communism, apartheid, fascism. And at least the people under those tyrannies understand the situation they're in. They're in a tyranny. And they can see, at least the front men, who are in control of the tyranny. Eventually, it might take a long time, but eventually there will be a rebellion against that kind of tyranny where you know where you stand. The greatest form of control, which can go on forever until it's exposed, is a tyranny you can't see, touch, and taste, where you're sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bars. Because people don't rebel against not being free when they think they are. And so what happened in this sleight of hand when the colonial powers apparently gave independence is there was a move from a tyranny you could see, colonial control from London overwhelmingly, to a tyranny you couldn't see, which is called democracy, which is called putting a cross on a piece of paper every 4 or 5 years, and then the people you voted for or not voted for often doing what they bloody like. It's called freedom. It's very good. I want to try it sometime. And so what we've had is a hidden tyranny ever since, masquerading as freedom. And what these bloodlines and the secret society network they control have done is set up the equivalent of a transnational corporation. As transnational corporations work, they have a headquarters, and then in the different countries they have subsidiaries. And the subsidiaries do what the headquarters tell them to do. Corporate policy, they call it. Well, what these bloodlines have done is exactly the same, only it's secret societies for subsidiaries. The headquarters, the center of the web in Europe, dictates the ongoing policy, which is constant centralization of power in every area of our lives to bring about this point where the few can control the many from a central point. And in each country is the subsidiary network of the secret society network, and that network in each country has the job, and it's bloody completed it a long time ago now, of controlling that country's government, any political party that has any chance of forming a government, its banking system, its transnational corporation system, its media ownership, and the military, and all these other institutions, medicine, science. And so, having established that in different countries around the world, when the central point, the spider in the center of the web in Europe says, this is what's going to happen now, these subsidiary groups start to bring it about in their sphere of influence, their country. And this is how you see, and it's more and more blatant now, this is how you see the same things happening in every country virtually at the same time. When there's a problem, like a financial crisis, engineered of course, then the reaction to the problem, and maybe we could sit down and say, well, maybe we could do that, maybe we could do that, maybe we could do that. What about that? Try that. No, there's one solution. And in the case we're experiencing now, it's throwing infinite amounts of what we call money at the banking system that created the problem. That is the answer all over the place, because that is how it's coordinated to be. The idea is to control through this web every area of the world. And they've been doing it covertly and building up that control to the point now, and I said this years ago, there's going to come a point, because it has to come, if they want to bring from the secret and hidden into changes in society, there has to come a point where this stuff breaks the surface where we can see it, because it has to if it's going to become the changes in society they want. And we're at that point now where it's clearly broken the surface and we can see it. And what they've done is created this tapestry, web of transnational corporations and groupings which appear to be different and have different owners and different agendas and competing with each other. But it's like going down a high street and you see all these different names, and again, some of them seem to be competing with each other. But when you do the research and you go back and you look at the holding companies, you find that the same holding company controls this and that and that and that, and actually controls this, which is apparently competing with that. And this is what they've done. These families and their secret society network, which go under the name of Illuminati, the illuminated ones, they are the force that is ultimately behind all these apparently unconnected groups and corporations, and they move as one unit as a result. And the idea is to imprison humanity in the way that Orwell described, and the way we're experiencing now, not even by the day, but by the bloody hour, of more and more surveillance, more and more control, more and more suppression, more and more police state. And in doing so, manipulating the way we perceive reality, so we, as the external world moves in on us, the internal world moves in on us, and we become less and less of who we are. So, let's get real bloody bizarre now. If you've never seen my stuff before, it's time to leave. Who are this non-human group or grouping behind these particular bloodlines, and how do they interact? I had to go through this, so everyone else should as well. I was minding my own business in the 1990s, and suddenly, I don't know what is this force I picked up or picked me up, I don't know, 20 years ago. But it's like opening and shutting doors and in a maze, and it says, okay, not down there, down there. Look at this. Okay, now look at that. And what tends to happen is a theme comes into my life, and suddenly things are coming at me in relation to that theme from every angle. From 2003 to now, it's been the nature of reality all the time. Just earlier to that, from the just after mid-90s onwards, I kept coming across people who were telling me they'd seen, apparently human people, turn into a reptilian form and then go back again in front of their eyes. And you think, okay, right, back burner with that one. But as the months and the years passed, these were coming at me all over the world. And then I started looking at ancient texts and stuff like that and accounts, and you could find the same stories being told all that apparently time ago. And there are many non-human entities that are interacting with this reality. But the theme that keeps coming to me over the years in relation to these bloodlines behind the Illuminati is of some form of reptilian entities, which are the next stage on. because it goes on beyond them, but the next stage on behind the Illuminati bloodlines and the interbreeders with them is this reptilian group, which sounds real strange until you go with it. Now, again, this is why the first part today is so important. These people know that the body is a biological computer. So to them, that's how they look at it. What we call procreation is the downloading of two hard drives, if you like, into one, which creates the offspring. To these people, they see that as a downloading of a computer program. And so the obsession, and this is real, goes right back to the ancient world, right up to the present day, the obsession that these bloodlines have, take royalty, aristocracy, and the major banking and business families of the world, they interbreed incessantly, and always have. And it's because, from their point of view, they are holding a software program, which is what? Information. It's a state of being. And when you interbreed that, these hybrid bloodlines, with the general population, that, to them, unique software program, computer program, starts to dilute very, very quickly. So what they're trying to do is hold that software, hold that information within the computers by interbreeding with each other. The oldest form of religion and worship so far established is serpent worship. It's massive. It goes right back. 70,000 years ago is the oldest evidence in South Africa of serpent worship. And after I'd written a book called The Biggest Secret, when I introduced this for the first time, I went to speak in South Africa, and I met this man, Credo Muchwa, who contacted the organizers of my event and said, I want to talk to this man. So I went to see him, and I spent days with him in the end. And he first said to me, he said, Mr. David, he said, how do you know about the Chitahuri? And I said, well, who are they? He said, they are the children of the serpent, the children of the python. That's what Chitahuri translates as. And he told me that when the colonial powers came into Africa, as everywhere else, they targeted the shaman and the carriers of the ancient knowledge and the ancient history of that area, and in his words, they milked the minds of the shaman and then killed them. So to keep the knowledge alive, the shaman streams started to create their own secret societies with horrendous initiation rituals to make sure you really wanted the knowledge. And they carried it underground so it would survive. Because what the colonial powers wanted, in other words, these bloodlines behind the colonial powers, they wanted to destroy as much of the ancient knowledge as possible, because then they could impose their own version of history, which would write out what they didn't want people to know. So what is he now, 90? Crikey. 60 years ago, nearly, he was initiated into these secret societies in South Africa, and that's when he learned about the Chitahuri, and he's gone on learning ever since. That is a painting. He's a brilliant man. He's a library on legs. That's one of his paintings of one kind of the Chitahuri, as he calls them. There are many different types, as there are different types of human. And he showed me this, what he calls the necklace of the mysteries. It's mentioned 500 years ago in accounts. He reckons it's at least 1,000 years old, and he calls it a necklace. You put it on your shoulders. Oh my God, it's so heavy. And he sits there for hours with it. I don't know how he does it. And what he does, because he's the official storyteller of the Zulu nation, what he does is use these symbols to tell the story of Africa, the people of Africa. And right at pride of place at the front is a human woman and a very clearly non-human man with a big willy in come and get me mode. And interestingly, he says that was originally gold. And then someone stole it, and they couldn't replace it with gold, so they replaced it with copper. But then again, this is southern Africa. You go to North Africa, and one of the key foundation stories and myths of ancient Egypt is of the golden penis of Osiris. And the more and more that I see this, these are symbolic of this bloodline, of this connection, this hybrid bloodline connection. And what Credo was saying, yeah, I used to go out with someone like that. It was good. That's the lady. And here's the guy. Now, he doesn't look very reptilian. I pointed that out to him. And he said, this is the story. The Chidahori, when they were manifesting openly in some areas, said, you must never portray us as we really are, otherwise death. So he said what people did is they portrayed them as clearly not human in various ways, but not actually as they really looked. Although if you go one stage back from Sumer, in the same area, which was the Ubaid culture, which preceded Sumer in Mesopotamia, now Iraq, you do find in the graves of Ubaid graves, there have been found very clearly representations of reptilian mothers and babies and all the rest of it. This is a symbolic image by Neil Haig of this hybrid bloodline, which has we all have, and I'll come to this, we all have reptilian genetics, very, very serious reptilian genetics within the body hologram computer, but these hybrid bloodlines have much more reptilian genetics, and therefore have much more of the reptilian genetic personality, if you like. And around the world, again, it's like, have you seen that new car? No, and you see them everywhere. Again, once this reptilian thing came into my life, I started to realize just how much reptilian imagery there is everywhere, all over the world. And the ancient myths and stuff like that of the Nagas in Asia, the people who were said to be part reptilian, part human, and could move between the two. And the many images you find portrayed of this coming together of earth women and this reptilian race, and part human, part non-human, and all the rest of it. These are just a few examples that have been sent to me from around the world, but crikey, there's loads and loads of them that portray the same basic symbol of, again, fighting the snake, fighting the dragon is all part of it. And of course, one of the key stories in the Bible is of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which, when you read that story in the way it's portrayed, absolutely changed the way that humans acted and saw themselves in the world. When you see the symbolic way that it's talked about. And I was on a Christian radio station in America a few months back, and they said, oh no, serpents and all that. I said, well, hold on a second. Do you think that if you believe the Garden of Eden story, and again, the Garden of Eden story told in different ways using different names, you can find that all over the world as well. Same recurring theme. And I said, do you really think that if you believe it to be, that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was a snake on the ground? Could you think it could be that could be symbolic of something? And it's just another example of the reptilian symbolism all over the place. And when you look at the castles and the stately homes of these bloodlines in the aristocracy, and also in the churches as well, and they're behind them, and they were behind the building of them, then again, you find these what we call gargoyles that have a reptilian feel about them. And the coats of arms of so many of these aristocratic families carry the dragon in various forms. Some people, and there is a lot of truth and accuracy in it, describe London as Babylondon, because that became the new center of this bloodline network. And that's why this tiny bloody country just off the coast of Europe had that empire that spanned the world. How could that be? Because that was the the center of their operations, and therefore was the center of their empire. And so appropriately, the very symbol of the City of London, the financial district, the original City of London, where St. Paul's Cathedral is and all the financial stuff, where they've messed around with the global financial situation as we're currently experiencing, the symbol is two flying reptiles holding the shield of a very significant secret society within the Illuminati web called the Knights Templar that control London. Here it is. Very appropriate, and I would suggest not without coincidence, or not coincidence. When you pass into the City of London from the main urban sprawl of London and stuff, you pass these flying reptiles on each side of the road holding this Knights Templar shield. And the district of the City of London, which controls so much of world finance, runs into what is known as the Temple in London, which is named after a Knights Templar temple. And at the point, and that's where so much of the global, not just British, but the global and certainly the Commonwealth law network is controlled from. At the point where those two meet, the City of London and the Temple, is this flying reptile in the center of the road at a place called Temple Bar. And then when you look at the recurring themes of dragons and reptilian monster figures in myths and stories, they go on and on and on. And of course, the whole basis of the Chinese culture and many of the Eastern cultures is of the dragon. And yes, things like ley lines were symbolized as dragon lines and all the rest of it, but that's not the only explanation for it. Why would the ancient emperors of China say, we claim to be emperor because of our descendants from the ley lines? I mean, they wouldn't do that. They said descendants from the serpent gods. That was their symbolism of the serpent, the gods. The word Messiah comes from Messa, which is the fat of the Nile crocodile, which they used to use to anoint pharaohs. Christ itself means anointed one. And even the devil in the Bible is described as in reptilian terms. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, who deceiveth the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And this theme of fallen angels, again, drops into this same theme of this takeover, which has been gathering pace through the centuries and now is where it is today. This is a painting by Credo Mutwa in South Africa, not far from the Kalahari Desert, which is a painting on his hut, which is symbolizing an ancient African story of the Chitahuri and how they ate people. And this is Alfa Romeo, which is straight from that ancient myth. I mean, why would Alfa Romeo have a bloody snake in a human? It's a bloody car. And next to it, of course, is the red cross on the white background of the Knights Templar secret society. This is a home of Silvio Berlusconi, who thinks after an earthquake disaster, just see it as having a weekend of camping. I mean, this man's not real, but he's leader of Italy. I don't know whether you saw that story. That's what he said, that the people in that earthquake zone should see it as a weekend of camping. I mean, you can't make these people up. They have no empathy. And again, here's that same theme. The fairy stories and the fairy tales of the frog turning into the prince and all these constant themes relates to the same stuff in the ancient world coming through to today. And this is a book that's given to some American school children, and it's about shape-shifting from reptilian into human. And they say I'm crazy, and they're They're giving it to school kids. Oh, it's just a story. No, it's not. I wish it was. And this is a point, and this has got me tremendous ridicule. I don't care, I'm bothered. But shape-shifting, right? This is another recurring theme, not just in the endless people now around the world who said, yeah, I saw that, I've experienced that. Seeing someone move from a human to a reptilian form and back again, you find this too in the ancient accounts, the shapeshifters. And not just into reptilian, but into other forms as well. And then, again, I keep saying it, this is why the first part of this presentation was so important, because without that, we really can't get a fix on some of this stuff. People say, and I understand it completely, you can't shift from a solid body to a solid body and back again. It's daft. I agree completely. You can't. But that's not what's happening. These different physical forms are energetic fields. Let's go back to that image from earlier of the energy field. It goes through the decoding system and becomes an apparently physical form that we see in our everyday life. Shape-shifting takes place in one place only, in the decoding system of the brain, which again itself is a vibrational field beyond the physical. So you have an energy field that is human, and you're decoding that into a human body. Then the reptilian level of that comes forward and becomes the dominant field, and suddenly you're decoding a different energy field, and then it returns and you're decoding this one again. In your decoded reality in the experienced holographic physical world, you see someone human, you see him reptilian, you see him human. Did you see that? It's only going on in here. Of course, shape-shifting from solid to solid to solid is impossible, but that's not what it is. How appropriate. Because they're holograms. All physicality is holograms. It is an energetic field, and at the end, the level of the energetic field, because it's not solid, it's movable, changeable, and then becomes changeable in the decoded reality as we observe it in their head. That's where shape-shifting goes on. And again, we are perceiving, through what we call visible light, a tiny frequency range of human sight, human decoding. But just outside of this frequency range and beyond into frequencies well away from this one are endless kind of worlds and realities. And I say further away in that sense, but actually they're all sharing the same space. You know, in this space that I'm standing in now are all the radio and television stations broadcasting to Melbourne. I can't see them, they can't see each other because they are operating on different frequencies. And when you tune into one of those frequencies, that's what you get. And what this physical body does is to tune us through that telescope I talked about earlier into and through the receiver-transmitter crystalline structure, it tunes us into this tiny range of frequencies called visible light, and this becomes the only reality. But interspersing this reality is all existence. And just outside of this frequency range, just beyond visible light, lie these reptilian entities and many other entities too. And you know, you'll be in a house and you'll see a cat, for instance, reacting to what is to us empty space. And you'll say, what's wrong with the cat? Don't be daft, nothing there. But to the cat, there is something there, because its visual frequency range is much greater than ours, and therefore it's seeing things in the space that we can't see. And it's because this knowledge is kept from us that things that are happening in the world are dismissed as ridiculous, and people like me are dismissed as crazy, because it's a very simple, very powerful thing. And it sounds an obvious truth, but sometimes we miss the obvious truth. People's sense of what's possible comes from what they think is possible. And what they think is possible comes from the information they receive to tell them what is possible. If you suppress the knowledge of what is possible, you suppress their perception of what is possible, and they will laugh in the face of the truth and say it's impossible, when actually if you understand to a greater level than the mainstream allows you to understand, you realize not only is it possible, it's perfectly bloody logical. So, just as we have ghosts, as we call them, which is energy just outside of our frequency range, and sometimes it just enters our frequency range, and we can see it as ethereal. Whereas if it was absolutely on our frequency range, it would look as solid as you and me. It's like a radio station not being quite on the dial. You don't get a sharp reception, you get interference. And in the same way, these reptilian entities lock into these bloodlines and take over their mental and emotional faculties. I've talked to many psychics around the world who have the ability to go further out than the norm in terms of their decoding of sight. And they, many of them have told me how they've seen not just reptilian entities, but other entities too, non-human, who are what they call overshadowing humans as they observe them, and locking into these bottom two chakra points here, the base chakra and the one just above. And what they're doing, because the body's a hologram, is they're locking into that human energy field, and they're taking over its mental and emotional processes and perception processes. Now, let's go back. There you go. Oh yeah, we'll come to them in a sec. It's all about vibration and vibrational compatibility. These reptilian entities are vibrating to a certain frequency. Humans are vibrating to another frequency. What the hybrid idea is about is to infuse as much of this frequency, because that's what it's all about in the end, frequency, because that's the base prime reality of the hologram. It's to infuse as much of this frequency into this frequency to make them as compatible as possible, to allow this age-old recurring theme right up to the present day of possession to take place. And it's much easier to possess something that you are in vibrational resonance with, or much closer to it, than something that's very much further out. And so these hybrid bloodlines basically are there to create the vehicles that these reptilian entities just outside of this frequency can then take over. And they are manipulating this world through apparently human bodies, when if you could see further out, you would see anything but a human overshadowing these people that are in the positions of power. So these guys, I found this picture on the internet, it's very appropriate. These guys are basically empty shells. And they are vehicles to, I'm not saying every one of these are, but I think most of them are from what I'm looking at. But the basic theme is the people in positions of power are merely vehicles for something else that is in control of their faculties and control of their mind processes. So we have the advisors in the shadows within this reality, who really are in control of the people who appear to be in power. And then one step back from them, just outside of this visible light dimension, we have these entities that are calling the shots in so many ways through into this reality in terms of what happens here. And after my experience of this explanation of the schism and all the rest of it, I refer to these now as the schism people, because this schism resonates out down into this reality, this disharmonious conflict, chaos, and all the rest of it. And as it plays itself down into this reality, it manifests itself in various ways. And it is in those entities that lock into that schism energy, they manifest its state of being. They are expressions of it. And you find that these people do not have the basic values of compassion, empathy that most humans have, because they're locked into a deeply disharmonious and imbalanced consciousness that manifests out those values. And so to these people, pepper bombing Baghdad, they have no emotional consequence for that at all, because they have no empathy. Whereas we couldn't do it because we would have empathy with the consequences for others of their actions. And so they are operating on a completely different point of observation of life, reality, than we are. And therefore, anything goes with these people because of that. And these schism people, as they've taken control of human society, have created what? A human society that represents that schism. It's division. It's fighting with each other. It's trying to compete with each other, dominate each other, top dog, up the greasy pole. They're all manifestations of this basic energy disharmony. And so it goes up the levels from the human up through eventually to this schism energy. And all these things are manifestations within the decoded holographic world of the state of disharmony of this energetic schism, which has affected life in this reality, this part of it anyway, so fundamentally. So you have these reptilian entities, I'm sure other entities too, but the reptilian thing keeps coming up, who take over the thought process and mental processes. And we see the human when we decode that energy field of human, but behind it is something looking very different. Someone sent me this picture. It may be just a play of the light, but it's symbolic of what so many people see. Some people see full body shifts. Talk to those people all around the world. But what seems to be the common theme more than anything is the eye shift, where they take on a reptilian type straight down pupil instead of the round one of the human, very much symbolized by this. And a few weeks ago, a scientist friend of mine called me and said he'd been chatting to an acquaintance of his who's just been doing, I don't agree with it, but he's just been doing research into iris scan technology, which led him to look very closely at 2,300 eyes as part of this research. And his friend didn't know anything about my stuff at all. He was just in a conversation, and he said that around 4% of the eyes that he looked at very closely appeared to be of reptilian type and appearance, which is maybe about the percentage we're looking at. Someone sent me this with Father George Bush. I don't know. I think that's, again, a play on the light, almost certainly, but so symbolic, because I know a number of people have seen this guy shift. There's a magazine. It's called 40 Times or something. A few years ago, they ran this front page picture, taking the mick out of me. And I said, thank you very much. That's just very symbolic. I love that. Thanks very much. And so they find a few of these pictures on the internet now as it gets around. Hey, there you go. And one of the things that I've looked at very closely over the years, particularly towards the end of the 80s and early across 2000 and so, are the mind control projects and the satanic ritual abuse projects to help people who've been through that. And the number of times when people have been through satanic ritual abuse and all the rest of it, that they talk about in reptilian terms about what they experienced. And these were some pictures drawn by someone who went through satanic ritual abuse of the kind of things that she remembers from what happened in the rituals. And again, the reason the therapist sent these to me, with the person's permission, of course, was because she was constantly drawing reptilian imagery, because that's what she experienced in the ritual. And if you remember Rosemary's Baby, that film of the 60s, which was directed by Roman Polanski, and shall we say he should bloody know, with Mia Farrow, and she was manipulated by a satanic family to be impregnated, to give birth to this child. And at the end of the movie, when you saw briefly the child in the crib, which was a hybrid, it had reptilian eyes very clearly. And Like I say, Roman Polanski should know. So this theme of possession goes way, way back through history, and it's possession through, overwhelmingly in this case, vibrational compatibility because of this interbreeding. There you go. Good old tone. So they're talking about him being the first president of Europe now. Crikey, it gets worse, doesn't it? Mr. Fake Smile, Mr. Fake Emotion. One of the things I've noticed about these people, and when I was in the Green Party years ago in Britain, I saw a number of British politicians close up, and you see their dark eyes, and you see something else. Their eyes and their face don't talk the same language, as I call it. You know, it's funny how people are famous or infamous for their massive smile, like Obama and Blair. But when you see the big smile, look at the eyes. Hillary Clinton's a classic. The big smile, the eyes never smile. Cold, steely eyes. But what's behind these people? Just a touch vibrationally out of human sight, behind the painted smile. This guy, Ted Heath, he was Prime Minister of Britain from 1970 to 1974. He was the guy that signed us into the European Union. Major person involved in the Bilderberg Group and various other things. And I wasn't into any of this stuff at the time. I was a national spokesman for the British Green Party. And I was asked to go and speak on this election program on Sky News years ago, back in the 80s, 89 it was. And I arrive, and the lady takes me into this makeup room, and we go through the door, and it appears to be empty. She says, someone will be along in a minute, and walks out. So I sit down in the chair, I'm looking at the mirror, and I catch someone just to my right. And I look across, and it's this bloke who'd just been interviewed on the program, and he was sitting there waiting to have the makeup taken off. So, you know, cheery bloke. I said, all right, mate, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. And no word was spoken by this guy in the entire experience. He sat there looking at the mirror, and when I said hello, he turned his chair and he looked at me. A very strange look. His head never moved once he turned it. Then his eyes started at the top of my head. I went slowly down my body, real slowly, to my feet, and then went back again, and then turned and looked at the mirror. And all I could say, looking back, he was scanning me. The thing was, though, when he was scanning me and I was looking at him, all his eyes, whites as well as everything else, went completely black. And what I found since is a few things. First of all, this guy was seriously into Satanism, was a major Satanist in Britain, and child abuser. I put it in my books while he was dead now, but I put all this in my books while he was alive. And a journalist rang him and said, you seen what this David Icke bloke's saying about you? And, oh, he must be mad. And that was the end of it, because it was true. I talked to the people, many people he abused. And the other thing that I found after I had this experience, and I got into this stuff after 1990, are the stories around the world of the black-eyed people, of which the same story is told. These people's eyes go completely bloody black. And you know, when we look at each other, we make what we call eye contact. But when I was looking into Ted Heath's eyes, there was no point where there was any contact. I described it to my family when I got home. You never believe what I've just experienced with Ted Heath. I said to them, it was like looking into two black holes. There was no point where there was a contact. And what I understand now, I was looking through the physical human energy field into that which was behind him, that which you never see. So we all thought these people, and if we could see not that far beyond visible light, we'd see something overshadowing these people that is very different to the way they look. Oh, I love that. Hey. They say a picture tells 1,000 words, don't they? Oh, yes. And that's the other thing. And, you know, what are the British royal family famous for? Emotionless behavior towards their offspring and stuff. And you find that a lot with these, not always. And again, you know, I'd throw this away, but the thing that I've more and more begun to kind of understand, or at least go in that direction, seeking more understanding, is that because we live in a digital reality on one level. You know, you've seen these adverts, where the digital adverts now, where they put in famous actors from the past, from movies, and they put them in with modern actors in adverts and stuff. They don't do it so much now, but a few years ago it was very popular. And the real best ones, you can hardly tell the bloody difference, even at that level of technology. The level we're talking about in terms of the reality and the manipulation of the reality is light years beyond anything that we have here. And you know, they talk about sentient programs in the Matrix, and the woman in the red dress who appears to be absolutely like everyone else, but is actually just a digital insert. More and more that I understand this, I'm sure there are vast numbers of digital inserts around, and I think a lot of them are these people, actually, that are just vehicles for these other entities just outside of human sight to run this reality. And it seems to me there are three types. There are those that are digital implants. There are those people in the world who are conscious and have the potential to connect to consciousness, but are stuck in mind, which I talked about earlier. And there are those, and thank goodness they're in increasing number as this awakening goes on, who actually are in this reality, but are connecting to levels of awareness beyond it. And that's where the change lies. Oh, Neil Haig knocked this out as a bit of a joke. The red dress bloodlines of the digital implants, maybe. This guy, Carl Sagan, what time is it? We're obsessed with time. I'm not doing too bad. This guy, Carl Sagan, the cosmologist, he wrote in great detail about the impact of reptilian genetics upon humans. And human behavior. And he wrote this book, The Dragons of Eden, going back to history and the talk of dragons and the reptilian and stuff, but also the reptilian genetics that is within all of us. Fundamental part of the human body, the human hologram, is reptilian genetics. And as this guy said, understanding the reptilian background to the human body, or the human being as he called it, is to understand so much about human behavior. The oldest part of the human brain is called the R complex by scientists, short for reptilian brain, because of the reptilian input that we've had in our body development. Now, there are other parts of the brain that balance out the characteristics of the reptilian brain, but if you have an infusion of greater reptilian genetics, you are going to have, obviously, a greater infusion of the characteristics of the reptilian genetics. And this is mainstream science when they're talking about the reptilian brain. From there, we get primitive emotional responses, cold-blooded behavior, and territoriality, as they call it. This is mine. I own it. I control it. A desire to control. An obsession with hierarchical structures of power, aggression, might is right, winner takes all, come from the reptilian brain. And they are absolutely the characteristics of the Illuminati families. Also from the reptilian brain, we get the survival responses, and on that level they're very good, things like fight or flight and all that stuff that gets you out of danger. So, the more we can be put into a sense of survival in our perception and state of mind, the more we are locking into that reptilian part of the brain, and that's the kind of stadium that these people understand more than any other. And we're being locked into that all the time as we are manipulated to fear not surviving in endless ways. Not just fearing not surviving in terms of life and death, but fearing not paying the mortgage at the end of the month, fearing of having your house foreclosed. They all lock you in to a sense of needing to survive. And the other thing that these entities do is feed off human energy. And to feed off human energy, they have to pull humans into an energetic state that they can feed off. If you're in a state of harmony, they can't feed off it because never the twain shall meet vibrationally. So they pull us or seek to pull us into a state of disharmony, of stress, of fear, of conflict, of aggression, of anger and all the rest of it, because that's pulling us into an energetic state that they can then feed off because that's their energetic state. And they seem to operate in what an astrophysicist friend of mine called Giuliano Conforto calls interspace planes, which is like a neutral zone between dimensions, where you need to, as she puts it, find a source of energy, because there's not a natural source of energy there on the scale that there is within a fully fledged reality dimension, whatever you want to call it. And I said to Credo Mutwa, do you have anything in your culture that relates to interspace planes, these neutral zones? He said, oh, yes, he said, we call them the heaven between heavens. He said, that's where the Chitahuri are. And so that takes them so close to visible light and the reality that we're experiencing. And what they're doing is feeding off human energy by manipulating us into an energetic state in which they can feed off, and also to keep us in mind and not open to consciousness. Years ago, last time I came to Australia, I had a strange experience. I spoke in Sydney, and afterwards I was introduced to this Freemason who said he was 33rd degree or something. He wanted to meet me, and because he wanted to know how I knew what I knew. He said, how do you know that? You're not supposed to know these things. So anyway, I met him, and he said, I said, I'm a good Freemason, he said. I'm trying to fight some of the bad things. I said, okay. He said, if you come to Canberra, he said, I'll show you around Canberra, and I'll show you the Freemasonry imagery. So, okay, I'll go. So I went to Canberra, and I met this guy, and he showed me all around the Parliament building and all the street plan around there and all the rest of it. And then he took me into the War Memorial, the War Museum Memorial in Canberra. And my God, it is a blaze with Illuminati and reptilian symbolism. And when you go into the part where the unknown soldier grave is, on the four corners and the pillars are depictions of soldiers, men and women, and then you've got the light coming up from the top of their head going up, and you've got a reptilian figure sitting above that, almost policing the connection to out there, and this satanic symbolism and all this stuff. And when you look at the sponsors of the War Museum, a number of them are like a who's who of the Illuminati in Australia, according to this guy. Anyway, I'll tell you what he said to me. He said, we need to get you some money. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah. He said, we need to get you some money to fund what you're doing. I said, well, hold on. I said, how are you going to do that? He said, we'll give you a credit card. I don't know who we was. He said, we'll give you a credit card. I said, well, how will that help me? He said, well, we fixed the computer system so no matter how much you spend, it never registers. He says, that's how we get our money, right? So anyway, I thought, I'm not sure about that in the least. And we said goodbye. He said, look, I've got lots of things to tell you. And never heard from him again. Disappeared from the face of the bloody earth. He's still around in Australia, I'm sure, but there you go. So this interspace plane is one of the kind of stumbling blocks energetically, which is trying to manipulate us from getting connected to the full nature of who we are. So this is seems to be the structure. Certainly at this level, it goes further out up to that schism, I believe. But at this level, you've got the reptilian entities. And Nephilim, that was the name of the hybrid bloodline in the Bible, the Nephilim. Just one of many, many names that they're called around the world in different cultures. The reptilian entities possess their hybrid stooges. And the secret society network within this reality manipulates the stooges and their gophers and agents into the positions of power at the top of the pyramids in all these different countries. These are the subsidiary networks I'm talking about. They then control all these other things like politics, finance, media, military, religion, and the royal networks, because that locks into them. And then down come the people. And these people at the top, who appear in everyday reality and on the news bulletins, often to be at odds with each other and fighting each other. And so lots of infighting goes on among these people because they're so imbalanced that of course they're going to fight for them, among themselves, but there is a level that knocks heads together when it gets in the way. And so they're manipulating, playing different countries and groups and Islamic and stuff off against each other. And if you notice, the people that declare the wars never bloody fight them. These people go off like silly sods and fight them. And these people who have nothing against these people, but those people tell them they should, and all the rest of it, and the people fight among themselves, creating great stress, great disharmony, energy to be absorbed, and all the rest of it, because they're manipulated by the tiny few into this stuff. I mean, if George Bush, had been in Iraq when the first bullet was fired, he'd been under a bed in Houston when the second bugger went off. These people do not fight the wars, they just declare them. We fight the wars, and if we stop fighting the sodding wars and came together, we've made the whole system completely impotent. So these are schism people coming down the levels of reality. And they feed off the energy that we generate through our states of emotional and mental states, and they manipulate that. Now, the one energy they can't take, the many energies they can't take, that they're in harmony, but what we call love, the energy of the heart, no way they want anything to do with that. They can't cope with it, and they can't sync with it, and they want to shut that energy off, and that's what they do by manipulating society and playing us off against each other. There's a guy called Mr. Emoto, a Japanese researcher I spent a long time with, spent a whole weekend with once in London. We actually wrote a book together, funnily enough, just not writing, but just talking and it all being translated. And he's famous for filming water crystals where he has put the water in contact with various vibrational states, and indeed just writing love on the side of the container, or hate, or putting a mobile phone on it, or whatever. And what he then does is, and I've seen his laboratory and stuff in Tokyo, he freezes it very, very quickly. And what is then captured in the water crystal is the vibration of the love written on the side, because you write love, generates love, if that's the motive of writing love. Hate, all the rest of it. So that is what a water crystal exposed to words of love and appreciation looks like. This is what a water crystal looks like when it's exposed to hate. Now, that's the world before the schism. This is the world afterwards. And it's this energy that represented by that crystal that these guys want us to produce, and the operations, the level that they operate on themselves. So we need to be very careful about the way we talk to each other, the way we express things, because if you can put the word love on the side of a container of water and create that difference, or hate, imagine what we're doing to the energy field and our own individual energy fields as we interact when we are hurling abuse at each other. But that's what these guys want. They want to conflict, schism, break up. The society is just a manifestation of that schism. So that again is love and appreciation. This is a crystal from water that had a mobile phone tied to it. And everyone's got a mobile phone. Oh, got a mobile phone. They're ever so convenient. Yeah, they burn my brain. It's good. Ever so convenient. You don't have to get anyone to burn your brain for you. It does it automatically. So the idea, and my God, have they succeeded up to this point, is to turn humanity at war with itself. That's the way they do it. And in this film, Monsters, Inc., which I took my son to years ago when he was a little boy, I nearly fell off the bloody floor, because that was all about monsters going from the monster world where there was no source of energy into the human world, frightening children, the scream, was caught in a kind of tube, and they brought it back to the monster world to be the power system of their world. And fear is the biggest, not just controller of humanity and suppressor of humanity, it's the biggest creator of this energetic state that they want. The Matrix talked about feeding off human energy and all the rest of it, turning humans into batteries. And that's what we're looking at in terms of the way the society is created. There are many physical underground areas which have been reported to contain reptilian and non-human entities, and I'm sure that's true within this reality, within visible light, but it's the ones that are just outside that seem to be the cause of this. There are many reptilian entities that seem to be very benevolent too. But the foundation of it all is puppet people. Without this, none of this other garbage could actually happen. That is prime. And the idea is to constantly take us in the wrong direction, make us misunderstand ourselves and reality so we act in the ways that suit them, to be in this bewildered state. The world is crazy, we think it's sane. So, God, I wish I had till midnight. Could keep going. So much, it all connects. So, it seems to be a bewildering world, and totally chaotic. And on the play-out side, it does seem to be like that, yes, but it's not really if you take a step back. And the key thing that I try to get across all the time are what I call coordinates, key coordinates. Once you have these coordinates, the crazy kind of complex, what's it all about world starts to take on a serious level of clarity. How a few control the world, pyramid power. The idea, if you look at the way they've structured society, both collectively and individually, whether it's a school or a university or a government or a corporation, they structure them as pyramids. And on a collective level, they have, it's that thing here. I've been told I have to be very careful here or I'll shut the whole thing down. That's really good, isn't it? They make a piece of technology, and right next to the laser pointer is a button that will shut the whole thing down. I never went to university. But okay, this opens the door and this activates the nuclear weapon, okay? The way they've structured is to hoard the knowledge, this advanced knowledge, both of what we'll be talking about now and what we talked about in the first section, in the highest levels of these pyramid structures that they've created. Every organization virtually today is a pyramid. You've got the few at the top who know what the game's really about, and as you come down from those few, you meet more and more and more people in these different structures, but as you go down, they know less and less and less about what the organization's really about. They're just going in, making their contribution, and going home. They don't know how their contribution locks into this contribution and that contribution, again, all innocent in and of themselves, to create anything but an innocent picture. Only they know that. So what they've done is hoarded the knowledge, not least through the secret society network, and they've sucked as much of that knowledge out of circulation as they can. And their nightmare now is it started to come back. Too bloody bad. Guys, it's about time. And this guy, Albert Pike, who was a Freemasonic god in America in the 1800s, Sovereign Grand Commander, Mother Supreme Council of the World, and all this stuff. They love their titles, these people. Pathetic. And he wrote this. This was in a book for Freemasons. Fictions are necessary to the people, and the truth becomes deadly to those who are not strong enough to contemplate it in all its brilliance. In fact, what can there be in common between the vile multitude and sublime wisdom? The truth must be kept secret, and the masses need a teaching proportional to their imperfect reason. That's what they do, is hoard the advanced knowledge and give us a fake version of reality. And this is the structure which shows, and I'm probably being bloody optimistic where I put these people. These are the levels of presidents and prime ministers and head of NATO and stuff. This is where, within the bloodline network and the shadow people right at the top, You never see. This is where the real power is. And these people who appear to be in power are actually just vehicles to introduce what is decided there into mainstream society. George Bush is a classic. Oh, hey, there he is, synchronicity. He's the next one. So people said, George Bush is big brother. What? You can't tie his shoelaces. No, he's not big brother. He's just a front man. And if you are in the public eye as a president and prime minister, you are by definition a front man. They don't put their key people there. They put gophers there. They might be in on it, a lot of them, and some of them don't. They're just manipulated, and some of them just want power and will do anything necessary for it. So they'll say, we'll put you in power if you do this. Okay, and so they'll become prime minister or president. And so now it's no different. This guy reads teleprompters better than George Bush did, but apart from that, policy is pretty much the bloody same, hidden by rhetoric. And in every country, including Australia, Britain, everywhere, you have overwhelmingly two parties, usually, that have any chance of forming a government. And so people think, we're going to change to them now, we'll change to them now. But the same force controls both sides, so whoever's in power is a representative of this force in the shadows. As some people say in America, don't vote, it only encourages them. I've not voted for years, it's a waste of time. Do you want this mask on the face or do you want that mask on the face? No, thanks. I'll go home, thanks, have a cup of tea. Do a lot more good than voting for either of them. This guy, David Roskopf, is a former managing director of Kissinger Associates, notorious Illuminati company, and he wrote this book last year called Superclass, in which he talked about a power elite that was making the world, but it was a cover story. It's becoming so blatant now that a few are running the show that this was a book to divert people away. Oh yes, there is an elite, but they're not connected, they're just loosely because they all don't. Oh, shut up. It's fundamentally controlled, man. Go away, take your check, leave me alone. And so this is how they've structured global society, of a series of pyramids within pyramids within pyramids, like Russian dolls, one inside a bigger doll, inside a bigger doll, inside a bigger doll. And so in the end, all these different pyramids of media, banking, politics, education, media, religion, all the rest of it, intelligence agencies, the pharmaceutical industry, all of it, they all are pyramids, and eventually they all answer to the same pyramid peak, which are these Illuminati families. And through this structure, they can put down from that point the same policies of incessant centralization of power and other changes in society, which here, as we experience them, seem to be coming from unconnected groups and institutions and places of society, when if you go to that point, they're all coming from the same point, and that's why it's so coordinated, and that's why now it's happening so quickly, because it's so coordinated. So what you have is one force manipulating in the play-out world of the daily experience, often apparently people in conflict with each other. It's all a game, it's all a mind game. This is the movie I talked about earlier, and this is the secret agenda that manipulates the movie to manipulate human perception in the same way that we've seen here in that image. And these people, in the end, are just puppets of this force. And like I say, I'll just go back on that one, but only quickly. This is to emphasize the point that because of their genetic makeup and energetic makeup, and the way that I now begin to understand they're connected to this schism energy in terms of their perception, this is why they can do these things and have no emotional consequence whatsoever, because they appear to have a very low, at least low, sometimes non-existent level of empathy with the consequences for others of their actions. Another coordinate, methods of manipulation. I think one of the most effective things I've ever come up with in this whole 20 years is this description of problem, reaction, solution, because it is so fundamental to pushing this whole thing on. And it's very simple. Everybody in this room will know about it, but just go for it because we're doing a DVD of this as well. So we'll, for people watching the DVD who haven't come across this before, maybe it's very simple. You want to change society in a way that you know that if you announce it openly, you're going to get a massive public reaction against it. So you don't do that. Stage one, you create a problem covertly. You get someone else to be blamed for it. It could be 9/11. It could be a government collapse. It could be the economic crisis we're having now. It could be a war. You then tell, through an unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media, the version of the problem you want the public to believe, i.e. bin Laden orchestrated it from a cave in Afghanistan or something. And if we had a media worth the name, problem, reaction, solution would collapse. Because at this point, they would investigate the official version, find it was a load of old crap, and they'd report to the public it was a lot of old crap. That's what real journalists do. We don't have many. John Pilger's one, mind, Australian. He's one. And instead, we go official version of events, reported to the public, virtually unquestioned. And it becomes official history without question. At stage two, you want the public to react with anger, with fear, with outrage, and you want them to say, basically, something must be done. What are they going to do about it? And then those who have created the problem, got that reaction, then change society openly through legislation to offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves covertly created. And that method alone has advanced this agenda through the centuries more than any other technique of manipulation. The 33rd degree of Freemasonry has this Latin motto, ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos and then offer a new order, a new world order, which is the code name for this conspiracy. And God, it's coming out their mouths all over the place at the moment, isn't it? We need a new world order. You do surprise me. So, this Second World War, the same families and networks were behind Soviet communism, were behind the United States, were behind Britain and the so-called allies, and they were behind Nazi fascism. They put Hitler in power. They funded Hitler. How did Germany go from the Weimar Republic, where they were taking their wages home in wheelbarrows, such was the inflation, to a war machine that took on Europe? Because it was externally funded by people like the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers funded Adolf Hitler's race purity expert, Ernst Rudin, on a whole floor of a German university to come up with his race purity crap. And it was funded by the Rockefellers in America. Because once you realize that this force is working through all sides, like we've just seen with that image, it suddenly is no longer a contradiction that a so-called American family, they have no allegiance to America, they have allegiance to their agenda, an American family would fund and create the war machine that then took on and killed so many Americans as well as so many other people. It's not a contradiction anymore when you know how the game works. And because they brought these two together, they created a massive global problem which allowed them to offer a massive global solution. All those United Nations, like the League of Nations after the First World War, and all the Bretton Woods Agreement, the World Bank, the IMF, and all this stuff was justified, including the European Union. Let's come together in Europe and we'll stop a war. Let's come together and have a central control of Europe, which we've just fought a war to stop. All came together, justified by stopping war in Europe. And now we have another version of it, which I call no problem reaction solution, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You don't need even a real problem, you just need the perception of the problem to get the public to support or at least not to efficiently reject what you want to do to change society. And this, now we are facing a presidential version of problem, reaction, solution. So put that in the light and I can see what I'm bloody doing now. I kept looking at my watch and misreading the time. I was very proud of that. I don't want to read the time, really. I want to stay here forever. I'm just getting started. What we've seen in America is presidential problem reaction solution. They brought Bush in just as a front man, fronting up these neoconservative, neocon people that were behind the Bush era and the invasion of Iraq and all this stuff, and Afghanistan. And his job, or that group's job, was to create massive problems, not least foreign wars and stretching them militarily, but also to create massive financial problems towards the end of the Bush administration, which is exactly what they did. And then there's a massive problem, there's great fear and anxiety, and then they bring in the used car salesman with the big smile and the dark eyes and very good at reading television.